Hello and welcome to the Record Celtic podcast. My name's Craig Swan and I am delighted to be joined this morning by Record Sport's Michael Gannon and also Record Sport columnist Chris Sutton. I should add Celtic legend Chris Sutton in there as well. Gentlemen, how are we?
Yeah, very good. Really enthusiastic after the window.
Michael?
Yeah, a little bit afraid this morning. But late night, obviously, the transfer deadline day. We're on right up to the kind of the back 11, 12 o'clock last night. It was, full of excitement last night, wasn't it?
Was it? Were you expecting it to be a bit busier, Mick?
Let's get straight into this. It's Tuesday, September the 2nd. It's the morning after the night before, or the week before, or the month before, or the summer before. Michael, can you try and sum up how this feels for Celtic supporters this morning as they wake up with the transfer window closed and they have a look at their squad?
Well, listen, bigger picture, they needed a couple of left backs. They got Kieran Tierney and they got Marcelo Sirachi. They wanted a couple of wingers. They got Michel Winge, Balikwisha and Janetke. Unfortunately, they sold another striker and didn't replace them. I think it's pretty much a shambolic transfer window for Celtic. There's no way of dressing this up. Celtic are actually not only are they weaker than they were in May, they're actually managed to get the window weaker than they were a day before deadline day. It's actually quite extraordinary how much they've botched this window. And it's I don't actually know, but I mean, look at the striking options they've got now. I mean, Daizen Maeda is now going to be the main centre forward, and they've got two wingers who the jury's going to be out on. I think shambles is probably putting it mildly. I don't know what Chris thinks. I just think it's incredible, really.
Yeah. But in the words of Jose Mourinho, I have no words. It's for Celtic to be in this position. I can't honestly think. I think Mick's described it well. Of Celtic having a worse transfer window, and it's really the sort of knock on implications of it. I mean, first of all, they've let Rangers, and if you want to include Hearts, well and truly into a title race. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You think about, just off the top of my head for starters, the Europa League. We could be back to the Ronnie Dyler situation where they closed the top tier. You can imagine Celtic fans who are so deflated. There's a lot of anger at the moment. Celtic fans who are so deflated at this moment in time. Are they really going to rock up at the at Parkhead for the 3 o'clockers on a Sunday after Europa League clash? I just think that it's from a position where going into the start of the season there was the assumption and the excitement of Champions League football after last season's progress, and then after getting knocked out of the Champions League and the performance against a bang average Rangers team at the weekend, and the performances all season really in the final third, you're thinking, blimey, Celtic are in a real mess, and then it's why. How have Celtic got into this position? But even things like on Sunday after the game, I think Brendan Rodgers said if Adam Idah leaves, he wants two in. So Adam Idah has gone, and yet there are zero strikers who have come in. There's rumours about Iheanacho, isn't there? But for Celtic to be in this position, as Mick said, it's absolutely ridiculous. It really is.
Is Iheanacho, this move for Iheanacho, obviously now his contract's been ripped up by Sevilla, is this the desperation stakes? I mean, Iheanacho hasn't kicked a ball for 2 years. I mean, a miserable loan spell at Middlesbrough after knocking back Celtic, by the way, last January. He scored 4 goals in 18 months. Is this not, I mean, reeks of absolute desperation?
Yeah. Be short and sharp. It does. It seems, and you guys will probably know better than me. It seems from the outside as Celtic had all the eggs in the Dolberg basket. That didn't happen. There was the sort of shambles of Adam Idah, by all accounts, going down to Swansea and then getting called back because Dolberg didn't go through. And yet, Adam Idah's gone. It was always going to be difficult, I think, for him to come back when it seemed like it was going to go over the line at Swansea anyway. But Celtic had to do what's best for them in that situation. And, it's a football club who were happy to let Kyogo go because Kyogo wanted to go by all accounts. Happy to let Nicholas Kuhn go by all accounts. In the end, pulled Adam Eder back, but made that decision to sell him. But even things like Yang now, for example, by all accounts, was going to Birmingham. So, and now he's not going. So the club have taken a stance on Yang, which is in total contrast to the way that they've taken a stance on Kyogo and Kuhn. And, the bottom line is the sad thing about it, and I don't have to say this, everybody knows it, is Celtic are in a position where they just have inferior players to what they did 12 months ago. And that's pretty unforgivable for Celtic to be in that position.
There's a lot of anger around the Celtic support this morning, and that's probably quite understandable. There's going to have to be some accountability around this. Brendan Rodgers has spoken long about a collective, and no one should say there's a disconnect and such like, but clearly something has gone wrong. Michael, where would you point the biggest finger of blame?
Well, listen, we've been in this movie a few times, not quite as horrific as this one. And usually somebody carries a can, usually a sacrificial lamb, and usually it's the head of recruitment. Listen, but Celtic will now have been...
Who is the head of recruitment?
Well, this is what I'm going to say, Chris. Lee Congerton get fed to the Wolves for a bad window. Nicky Hammond get fed to the Wolves, other couple of bad windows. We're now on to Paul Tillsdale, probably going to get fed to the Wolves because of another bad window. At what point does these guys become the problem or part of the problem? I mean, clearly there's issues higher up the chain, and Celtic have got difficulty in getting deals done. And we keep hearing about how hard it is to persuade players to come to Glasgow, how the Champions League is a big selling point and all that stuff. There's only 36 teams in the Champions League. There's 1,000 other clubs in Europe that seem to do okay persuading players to come. So this doesn't wash. Celtic have bumbled their way through the season. They have to get players in earlier than this. Rodgers himself said, notoriously late shoppers, right? That's not going to cut it. That doesn't cut it. You can't start going shopping after they've been papped out the Champions League. It's ridiculous. You went into that match underprepared, ill-equipped, and they paid the price. They were gambling on their Champions League with the transfer activity before that time, and now they're gambling on the league with the activity after it. I mean, it's really poor. So somebody is going to have to put their hand up and say, this is the reason why this went so badly wrong. None of this, every year, is the kind of, we apologise, we'll learn lessons, this won't happen again. Heard it last January, heard it the February before, heard it all before. Somebody's got to say, this is why it's going wrong, and here's what they need to do to fix it, because that's not good enough.
Who's going to say that then?
Bravery and ambition were two words used by Brendan Rodgers in the past, Chris. I mean,
say that again, sorry?
Bravery in the transfer market was something Brendan Rodgers had said previously last season. Ambition was another word that he used. At this stage, it doesn't look like Celtic had the ambition to go out and get the people they needed to get. Is that a fair comment? What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I mean that's glaringly obvious. The position that Celtic have left themselves in, and it's why did Celtic risk this situation materialising? And I had an argument at the weekend with Neil Lennon, and with Neil was saying, well, the position of the, it's not an easy situation because players wait to see whether they're going to qualify for the Champions League or not. But Celtic were in a position, and they knew that this tie was coming for 6 months. They knew this tie against Carrot Almaty was coming for 6 months, and we're going over old ground a little bit here. But Celtic chose to sell Kyogo, not replace him. They chose to sell Nicholas Kuhn, and Brendan, I think, in the presser the other day, Mick said that he wanted, if they sold Nicholas Kuhn, he certainly wanted a replacement. So they risked, by selling him, didn't replace him, and ended up going out in disappointing fashion. And then the performance at the weekend, Balak Wisher coming in, thrown in at Ibrox, and that was his first game. But you're thinking, blimey, just first impressions. It was, it was difficult for him, but he didn't look like. I mean, you go back to sort of Celtic of last season, the season before, and you think about the wide players Celtic had at their disposal, whether it be Kuhn or Maida or Jota, or go back even further, Lille Abada. Real pace and wizardry and trickery. And we know that Jota, the situation with Jota, that can't be helped. But the Jota situation, his serious injury, it did happen. Have Celtic reacted to that? They haven't. And, even with the wingers that Celtic have signed, Celtic is heavily loaded towards that left, to having a lot of left wingers, haven't they? And then you look on the right hand side, and James Forrest came on. Actually, Celtic looked to have a bit of a better balance when he came on at Ibrox at the weekend. But it looks like at this moment in time, it's not funny, but I'm laughing. James Forrest is going to be flogged this season. It looks like it's unfair on him to be wheeled out, but it looks like he's going to have to play a major part. We know he's had injury issues in the past, and Dazen Maida, who hasn't been at his best this season. I mean, God help Celtic if he gets a hamstring injury. I mean, Celtic are in sort of major bother. The squad is all of a sudden looking like it's lacking quality and looking like it is really thin. There are so. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but if you look at the first 11 at the weekend, the starting team for Celtic. Kasper Schmeichel, who had a sort of moment or two, but okay. Anthony Ralston coming in for Alistair Johnson. I love Anthony Ralston. I do. His game, is always willing, but he does lack sort of going forward and lacks the quality of Alistair Johnson. That's no slight on him. That's just what happens. You look at Carter Vickers hasn't been at his best. Liam Scales, I actually think, has defended pretty well this season. Kieran Tierney, that whole saga is just, I'm just scratching my head over that. Every week, Kieran Tierney coming off. And so
used to this after the game at Ibrox, didn't it, Chris? About how Kieran's going to have to go up to speed.
Yeah, and it's incredible. But then you chuck in the fact that the Inamura signing, and Brendan saying, well, Inamura isn't at the level and needs to go out on loan. This is all the sort of jumbled up thinking. I think teams look at Celtic now and they think, if we can stop Callum McGregor playing, what have you got? And just going back to the weekend, Engels looked short of confidence. Hatate, love Rio Hatate, but he wasn't at his best. And then you have two wingers. And look, we need to be fair to Balak Wisher, but he didn't look like he was rapid and wanted to get at 33-year-old James Tavernier, who has defensive deficiencies. He played safe. And Negrin, who's actually performed okay in the league, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that pace. He likes to come in on his left foot, and he looks like a creative player. But not once did you ever think he's going to get the better of Magoma, and he realised that. That played into Rangers' hands. And Dazen Maida, and this is Celtic's strongest starting 11 at this moment in time. Dazen Maida was just starved of service and looked short of the player he was last season. So then you think, well, let's look at the bench. What have we got to come on? And you're looking at the bench, and the truth is, other than sort of, you can bring McCowan on and what have you, the bench looks remarkably bare, doesn't it? And so then everybody's thinking, well, do you know what? In the next day or two, Celtic will just, they'll in the next 24 hours, wasn't it? Celtic will have to go for it. They'll have to strengthen. And we would have all sat there yesterday thinking, right, something big's going to happen. And then nothing comes up. I mean, it's
Celtic fans. It was probably a good example, just a few miles across the border, Chris, where Newcastle United had the money in for Alexander Isak, and they wanted to get Wisser. Brentford knew, as a selling club, that Newcastle, and they basically, from an initial offer of 30-odd million, ended up getting 55. Now, Newcastle probably didn't want to have to pay that, but they realised we've got the money in the bank and we need a striker, so we're just going to have to pay it. Michael, that was a situation that the Celtic fans were crying out for. Celtic have made money in this transfer window. With Kuhn and Ida going out and balanced up, and the other guys that have gone out, Lagerbelka, obviously, Telly Ocon for small fees. But what's been brought in is more than what's gone out. Celtic fans are furious at this, Michael. Where do you think they're going to take this from the other Celtic fans? What do you think how do you think they're going to react in the weeks ahead?
I think Chris is right. I think it's going to be fire and fury. And I think you're right. I've spoken to Celtic fans who are literally saying they're done with this. They're spending £800 for their season tickets. They're buying all the 5 shirts they bring out every year, all the merchandise, all of their junk. And they're saying, why is something that could be sitting with 80, 90 million pounds in the bank? And they're going to be getting into games now. They bought 2 left wingers after the Champions League exit. who both could be picked up for less money weeks ago. I mean, Chinecki is a guy who looked to me like the kind of backup if they didn't get Balak Wisher. They get him, and then they have to go back to him again because there's nothing. So who's going to play on the right-hand side? As Chris said, they both play left-sided. Balak Wisher can play through the middle, but he hasn't played much outright. Chinecki has played, I think he's played 3 games outright in his career. It's a guy who's by the way signed for £1 million in February and now costs 5.2 million. Hammarby must be sitting laughing themselves to the bank with this one. I mean, no disrespect to the guy. It might be he turns into a really good player, but he's another one of the guys that Celtic pick up the £2 million signings they usually go for, not a £5.2 million signing. Panic and absolutely really fit in as the team.
And just on that, and I think, look, I don't know whether this is right or not, but Balak Wisher and Chinecki coming in, this, as we well know, this may not be an easy environment to come into. Now, if the fans are showing their dissent, I mean, you look at just for example on the other side of the city, players like Joe Rosswell and Max Aarons, players who I regard as good, really good footballers. Max Aarons, I saw a lot of him at Norwich, and Joe Rosswell was an excellent player for Blackburn and Leeds. But all of a sudden, you watch them play, and they seem like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're just into the infancy of their Rangers careers because there's that sort of grumblings inside the ground. So these guys who Celtic have signed, Balak Wisher and Chinecki as wide players at Celtic, there is that expectation, and they're probably unfairly on them. I mean, I've already talked about Balak Wisher's performance. You can't judge him on one game, but there wasn't sort of anything really to hold on to from one game. But it is unfair to judge him on that first game. But people are going to expect them, because they are the new boys, to go in and have something about them. And if they've sort of got any sort of temperamental issue or weakness, then it's going to be really difficult for them. It is.
There's going to be mega pressure on them to deliver, but it is unfair on them because they are the kind of regular Celtic kind of squad signings. If they turn out good, then fantastic. If they don't, no harm done. But they've paid over the odds for these guys now, and they're under pressure to perform because they're going to have to be the main men. The striker issue, I mean, Dolberg, listen,
I'm sorry to break in, but this happened last year with Adamida, didn't it? Because they waited, Celtic. Yeah. They ended up having to pay £9 million, and he was judged on the fee.
Yeah.
Adamida had cost £5 million and scored 20 goals last season. People would probably be a lot more forgiving of him, but because of the price tag, now these two lads have come in at £5 million each. They're going to be expected to perform at a high level.
Yeah,
that's added. So that, as you say, that's put even more pressure on.
Saying Swan, but all feeds into the malfunctioning transfer policy. I mean, Dolberg. Listen, Ajax went at the last minute, Nick and Dolberg. That's going to happen on deadline day, right? That's the way of the world. His former club, he wanted to go there, but putting their eggs in that basket on the final day. Listen, if they really wanted Dolberg that badly, they were going to have to pony up and quickly before that point. You couldn't risk a deadline day scramble. Whether they like it or not, they should be slapping big money like they did with Ida and get it done because they couldn't risk it. It backfired again. It's just the bumbling nature of the window. I mean, Celtic have clearly got problems when it comes to recruitment. I mean, listen, I think the manager's part of this as well. I think he wants a certain kind of level of player. And we talk about Champions League and all that stuff. He wants a player for that level. Unfortunately, those guys command a certain wage, and Celtic aren't willing to go to that wage, and they're certainly not willing to take that kind of wage in July and the start of August, because they're going to wait and see what they can get elsewhere, which is what's happened with a lot of players in this window. They've waited because Celtic's offer isn't good enough to go in July. So they need to wait. They're going to sit tight. So unless Celtic drastically change the way they operate, or go back to the way they did before and say, we're just going to pick up £4, £5, £6 million players, pay them that salary, and hope they turn out to be decent enough to kick on. Because going to get that level of player clearly is not working, because they're not getting that level of player. They're ending up back with the player they would have went for at the start of the window and paying double the cost for them. It's utterly bonkers.
The Celtic fans are clearly furious at the hierarchy and for these type of things, Michael. Also, a lot of attention has now switched onto the situation with Brendan Rodgers. There was various Celtic fans that you heard last night basically saying they couldn't blame Brendan Rodgers if he walked because of what's happened here and the team what he's been left with, and his demands haven't been met. I mean, Chris, What situation do you think Brendan Rodgers is in? How do you think he's going to react to this? Where do you see it? Are the fans right to worry about Brendan Rodgers leaving or right now, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, if you just put yourself in Brendan Rodgers' shoes, and if you work off the back of simply, what he has said about, the need to bring new players in, better quality in, and I think I said at the weekend, the most telling thing in all this is Callum McGregor, who's very thoughtful in the way that he speaks, but for him to come out and be vocal on this topic tells you everything you need to know, really. And you think that if the club hierarchy don't want to listen to you journalists, and they don't want to listen to people like myself and other pundits and supporters, blimey, take a listen to your captain who's there in the building, in the dressing room, leading and saying we are short. So from Brendan Rodgers' position, he's gonna feel deeply unhappy about this. I don't know this, but is there some dynamic now higher up at the club which just isn't working? Has there been a breakdown somewhere? Because for Celtic to be in this position is absolutely remarkable, and that's speculation. But what could be the reasons for this? Is it because Brendan's in his last year of his contract, and there's that sort of uncertainty about whether he's going to sign or not? I doubt he will sign. I mean, my gut sort of feeling with this is because of what happened last time, Brendan leaving early. I don't think he'll do that again. I think that from his perspective, he would probably view this as, blimey, we've got a fight on to win the league this season, a serious fight on because of the lack of work we've done in the transfer market. But I'm going to show what a good coach I am. I'm going to get Celtic over the line, and then I'm going to wave goodbye to the club. I've done my job, and I'll see it through to the end this time and walk away. And Celtic still have a fair chance of winning the league. It's just that the club should never have been, or the team should never have been put in this position where they are going into a league season, and Rangers, all the turmoil which has happened across the city, all of a sudden. If you're a Rangers fan and you think, there've been a basket case this season with what's gone on with Russell Martin, but in many ways, I think the Celtic fan base at this particular time are probably just as angry, if not angrier.
But Chris, this is probably going to get worse in the situation that you guys have spoken about the main players. The main players are now, Celtic are going to have to go to the well with Callum McGregor and Dyson Maeda and players like that every single week. There is a chance they're going to break down. Celtic are 2 or 3 injuries away, for example, of being completely and utterly exposed in the Europa League. You're talking about Brendan Rodgers' his credibility as a coach and wanting to show what a good coach he is. He's been left in a terrible position here, Chris.
I think that's a great point you make, and where everybody was looking forward to the Champions League and trying to go again in that and trying to make progress. I'm like you. I'm looking at the Europa League. Does Brendan Rodgers have to prioritise now in terms of domestically, just bread and butter, winning the league, or does he go full hit in the Europa League? This should never have been the position for him to have been in. There are areas of the team which are glaringly weak, where Celtic do not have the strength, depth, and the cover. And, I'll say it again, Dyson Maeda, brilliant as he was last season, he has been flogged. And you talk about going back to the well. Celtic cannot keep going back to that same well, because eventually he will break down. So, managing Dyson Maeda and his minutes and how crucial he is to the team is going to be a huge part of, how Celtic get on. But the start of the season, he's missed a couple of big chances. He's back to the days of Maeda we sort of remember from the start. But it's not just sort of the forward area is of massive concern. The lack of creativity, the lack of pace and speed in those wide areas, the lack of players who want to take the fullbacks on. That's been alarming at the start of the season. And it's okay, if we're going to strip everything back, Celtic got over the line late against St Mirren. probably deserved to win, but didn't create loads of chances. Aberdeen, it was Nygren got his goal, nice finish, brilliant finish from Hatate. I know wallop Falkirk in the cup, but Livingston at home, comfortable win against them. But in the games which have really mattered, Celtic haven't shown up in the final third, and that's a worry. And then, have Celtic really strengthened that much? Maybe these players will come in who they've signed, Tonetki and Balikwisha, and they'll be the wow factor. Nygren has done all right domestically, but I just think from where Celtic are now to where they were a season ago, 2 seasons ago, it's night and day. And I'm not the only person seeing that, because you're seeing the same things, and so are the tens of thousands of Celtic supporters around the world. They're seeing the same thing as this and thinking, well, how can you have that much success and then not build on it? How have the club gone backwards? And Mixline was brilliant at the start. It's sort of not just the whole of this transfer window. It's the fact that Celtic are weaker than they were before the start of the weekend, which is an alarming position to be in when you're getting into the final stages of the transfer window. And Celtic, should they have sold Adam Eder? I mean, you can't leave yourself short in that situation, regardless of what people think about Adam Eder. That now looks to be a crazy decision.
And Michael, you speak to Brendan Rodgers a lot. You've been there when he's spoken about he'll do his 3 years. You've been there when he said, was asked, would you leave before? No chance would I be doing that. How do you think the situation's changed for him on the back of this?
Listen,
how do you think it's changed?
In the last week, 10 days, I gradually, in fact, right away from pre-season, we're out there in Portugal and Italy with him, when he started to make his louder his demands for quality and all that stuff. It's got louder and louder. Since then, the last fortnight, he has looked utterly deflated and defeated. He looks totally scunnered by the whole situation. I mean, and I'm thinking, I was going to see what you think, Chris. He said, I'm not here to maintain this club. I want to develop it and progress it. He talked about the ambition and where the club sees itself and where it wants to be. These are things that are going louder by the week, right? We know what happened the last time. They know the kind of outcry and anger and rage when he left the last time. Would he be forgiven this time for saying, this is not what I signed up for, I'm off and leave just now? Would he be forgiven for that? I think Celtic fans at this point in time would say, you know what? We don't blame you. I don't know what you think, Chris.
No, I'm in the position where I think that what we don't know, and this is where it's difficult for us all. We don't know the conversations which have gone on with regards to recruitment, how it works. Has he asked for certain players, and the club have just not sanctioned those signings? But on the face of it, with what Brendan has said and the state of the squad, which he's now going to have to work with up until the January window, he has been, the club are in a weaker position. So from his position, he has been let down. So he may feel like he's going to walk away, but I don't see him doing that because of what happened last time. As simple as that. Had the position last time not happened when he walked away, then I'm pretty sure he was. But that would, that whole situation has, I think would be in the back of his mind. And as I say, because of what a mess Rangers are in, and Hearts are a bit of an unknown. Hibs have had they've got a pretty decent team, but because Celtic should still win the league, but they're relying on a fair bit of luck now in terms of being fortunate with the injury situation. So I suspect he'll stay on. I may be wrong. Is he in his rights to walk? He would probably say that he is, because of the fact that he hasn't been backed. But as I say, the mitigating part of that is we don't know what conversations have gone on, and this has been my sort of thoughts on the club since I started working in the media and whatever. Nobody knows how the actual recruitment model at Celtic truly works. Brendan Rodgers may have a say in it. Nobody knows what Paul Tidsdale is doing. I mean, they just don't. Nobody knows the influence of the board and all these things. And because there's a lack of clarity, everybody just comes out and speculates. But where we are now, I mean, it doesn't matter about speculation. It's about actions. It's about what has happened. And Celtic are in a far worse position now than they should have been. And somebody has to carry the can for that. Somebody, is accountable for that. And it's up to the, club to actually sort that out. It just seems like they've been sitting on the hands. And recently, it literally seems like the last couple of weeks they've been making it up as they go along.
But Rodgers must think he's stuck in Groundhog Day. I remember the 2018, Dembele gets sold on deadline day, remember? And no replacement came in. And he was left with, I think it was Edward and Lee Griffiths, who at that time was going through some of his slightly more wayward times. And that first 6 months of his last season was pretty ropey, if I remember rightly. There was times when he had Lewis Morgan up front, James Forrest up front, Mikey Johnson playing up front at times. But that squad compared to the squad now, well, look, world beers. So he's trapped in the same movie again. I think you can be forgiven for thinking, what was the point in this? This is not what I signed up for when I come back 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago.
And obviously we've discussed the hierarchy, and the Celtic fans are clearly furious. And Chris used the phrase, "Someone has to carry the can" here. I mean, they are going to feel some serious heat, Michael, in the next few weeks, you would imagine.
Well, they are. I mean, it's going to be aimed at the board, and it's the executive part of the board. You've got Michael Dickerson, the CEO, and Dermot Desmond's going to cop it as well as the kind of power broker behind the scenes. But Peter Lawwell will get it, even though he's the chairman now and not part of these matters anymore, apparently. But they're all going to get it, because it gets back to what I said right at the start, and Chris mentioned as well. Supporters will accept, to an extent, the team falling short in the Champions League, or even in the league if it comes to it, if they feel as though the team and the club have given everything to be the best they can possibly be. Has Celtic given itself the chance to be the best it possibly can be? No, it hasn't. It's got £80 million in the bank and a lopsided squad with big gaps in it that didn't qualify for the Champions League, despite landing a tie against a team ranked 311 in Europe. And now they're opening the door to, in the league against the big rival. Looks as though they're all over the place at the moment. So they're not getting bang for their buck. And if fans aren't getting bang for their buck and they spend a fortune, then they're going to be unhappy. So they're going to have to face that flack. That's just the reality of it.
Well, we've covered the majority of the things that have gone before. So I guess the question, gentlemen, is what's going to happen next? Chris, you've alluded to the fact that the title race might well be on. Celtic have placed themselves in a position that they may be in some danger of losing their title because of how they've left this situation. Michael, I'll ask you first about it, and I'll give Chris the last word on this. Michael, where do you see this for Celtic just now?
Well, as I touched on earlier on, they've opened the door, haven't they? I mean, if you're harsh or you're rubbing your hands, Tony Bloom and all that stuff, Celtic are weaker than they were last season and even earlier in this window. So, I mean, they're probably lucky that Rangers are on a bit of a state of rebuild just now. We don't know how their new signings are going to be. They spent £30 million, but there's question marks with the manager, question marks with the recruitment. You look at, the way Hibs have started the season and played well in Europe. Aberdeen have made some good signings. I mean, I think Kevin Nisbet and the boy Carlson are arguably the better signings than Celtic made on deadline day. Boy Carlson has got a profile that I think would Celtic should have snapped up. Cap for Sweden, and £12 million signing for Bologna. Nearly a $5 million signing for Udinese a couple weeks ago. Missed that one into Aberdeen. Good signing. So yeah, they've opened the door. I think Celtic have opened the door and come in for some long, hard games this season. Because they're still lacking severely in the final third.
Chris, the next chapter of this is to be written. What do you think the story will be?
Well, what I think the story should be, I mean, first and foremost, from Celtic's point of view, the anger comes from the fan base because it never should have been like this for Celtic from the position of strength which they were in to be in this position now, where, as Mick said, they've left the door ajar to the likes of Rangers and Hearts. There's a real possibility that there will be a close title race this season. And with the mess that Rangers were in, I mean, that should never have been the case. Celtic had the opportunity to bury Rangers. Just imagine that the game at the weekend against a Rangers team low on confidence, Brendan Rodgers' first season, it's easy to have throwaway lines, but the Brendan Rodgers first season, that would have been 6-0. Ange Postecoglou peak, it could have been anything. 8-0 against that Rangers team. But it's sort of the game at the weekend against Rangers emphasised to me the need for Celtic to do something big in the final third, and they've ended up selling another striker when Brendan wanted 2 more in if Adam Eder was sold. So it's a position that Celtic should never have been in. And it's going to be interesting, the Europa League now. How is Brendan going to manage the Europa League and domestic football? Which should he prioritise, just simply because the squad is not strong enough? So it's going to be an interesting season. And, it's, but sitting here, I couldn't tell you how it's going to go from here on in.
Just finally, Chris, there's a Legends game this weekend at Celtic. Are you getting the boots out for this one? Or are you,
Well, I haven't, Mick. I did get asked, but I think the level of player in that Celtic team wasn't at the level which I wanted, so I reneged. Mick.
Well, got a couple of goals, you might get a contract.
Listen, bear in mind, you refused to put yourself in the picture last time when our team faced you guys at Parkhead. You kind of you chickened out of playing that. Did you know? You're in the dog.
Well, they wanted a top quality manager, a top quality leader, Mick, to lead the side. I thought I was better in the technical area. Yeah, you played well though, Mick, didn't you?
What happened to that transfer window then?
Guys, it's going to be a fascinating watch to see how this all plays out. Thank you both very much for your time this morning, and thank you to everyone for watching and listening. We'll be back next week.